I was an OR assistant. I did a lot of parts of the clinic, and one of my jobs was his right chair assistant. And I really didn't. I never paid attention. I did pay attention, but I didn't know that it was illegal. When he did an abortion, especially a over 20-week abortion, most of the time the fetus would come completely out before he either cut the spinal cord or he introduced one of the instruments into the soft spot of the fetus in order to kill the fetus. And but I wasn't aware. I thought, well, it's an abortion. That's what he does. But I wasn't aware that it was illegal.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. What you're going to learn in this half hour is going to shock and horrify you. I guess the shock is a little bit lessened because we have gone through the trial of Dr. Gosnell, who was convicted on 3 counts of murder, first degree. Joining us now to talk about what you just heard, and more importantly, to talk about what you haven't heard, because I haven't seen this anywhere in the media, is Stephen Ertelt, founder and editor of LifeNews.com. And Stephen, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you for taking the time. What we just heard, and for those watching at Newsmax.com saw, was a video from Life Dynamics, and these 3 women, if I'm not mistaken, worked with a Houston doctor by the name of Douglas Carpin. Is that true?
That's right.
Okay, and he's been accused by 4 former employees, 3 of whom are on this tape, and we're going to hear much more of the tape while you're here and then after you say goodbye, of delivering babies during 3rd trimester abortions, killing them, snipping their spinal cords, which is something we heard before, stabbing a surgical instrument, she says, on the soft spot. The soft spot, for those who couldn't see the interview, when she says it, is the head of the baby, which she calls a fetus, but once it's born alive, it's a baby. And also twisting, as you'll hear these women say later on, twisting the heads of the babies off their necks with his hands. What's the status of this doctor in this case, in this investigation? Where are we with that?
Well, it's been a huge expose, at least in the pro-life community, and of course, as you mentioned, the mainstream media really hasn't touched it that much. But what is happening is exactly what you said. We've got 3 former abortion clinic employees who have been a part of this big video expose, talking about how really this Douglas Carpin guy in Houston, Texas, who owns 3 different abortion centers in Houston. They worked at one of his centers there in Houston, Texas, and how he basically goes so much further even than Kermit Gosnell did, who, as you mentioned, jabbed medical scissors into the back of babies' necks. He, as you mentioned, kills babies with his bare hands, and it's really beginning to produce a storm there in Texas. It's not really getting a lot of national attention, but what's happening in the state of Texas is you've got local people that are beginning to speak up about this. The Lieutenant Governor of Texas, David Dewhurst, has called for an investigation. Local officials in Harris County have said that they are looking into him and beginning an initial probe of what he's doing down there in Houston. You've got Senator Ted Cruz, who on the floor of the Senate on Friday talked about this and the link between Kermit Gosnell and Douglas Carpin, and calling for a national investigation and Congress hearings on the abortion industry and what's going on. So it's beginning to get some momentum, but really, as we saw with the Gosnell case, the mainstream media just hasn't really touched it yet. The New York Times did a piece on it, and I think it was 2 paragraphs and then a link to something else. They didn't even really touch it. So it needs a lot of pushing by folks like you who are willing to talk about these kinds of things.
Well, I want to play more, but I want to ask you first. The fact that we know about Gosnell and the fact that we know allegedly about Carpin, those are 2 prominent doctors who have been for years in big cities in this country. Just imagine, or let me ask you, I would imagine, and tell me if you think I'm right, that if this is happening in places like Houston and Philadelphia, in clinics that have been around for a long, long time, what the heck is happening in so-called lesser clinics and in smaller areas and that have gone unnoticed? In other words, if we have these 2 examples, that this can't be it. This must be more commonplace than anyone could ever imagine or could ever want to imagine.
Well, it certainly is, and the folks that are behind this expose video and most of the research and reporting on what has gone on with Douglas Carpin, see, he's really the first of many. There are so many other abortion practitioners that are doing late-term abortions, so many states that allow them, so many states that, like Pennsylvania, are not following up on their state laws. You know, many states have health and safety standard laws that abortion clinics should be following, and of course they're not being held accountable for following. So the answer is we don't know how many are happening. We actually reported today at Life News a story about a lady in the state of Maryland, Nicole O'Reilly, a late-term abortion practitioner there. Her facility was actually raided, and just like Kermit Gosnell, they found the remains of 35 frozen late-term aborted babies at her clinic in Maryland. Again, no oversight, no accountability, no state investigations, not doing anything until pro-lifers begin to get information from former workers, from women who were injured by abortions, as she injured a woman and perforated her uterus in a botched late-term abortion. So once this information comes out, then pro-life groups are filing complaints with, state medical boards, for example, and some investigation and some initial action is finally happening. But we've got state officials in states around the country that are just not doing their job.
We're talking right now to the founder and editor of LifeNews.com, Stephen Ertelt. Am I saying it right?
That's right.
Okay, just want to make sure. Here on the Steve Malzberg Show, let's listen to some more of this. Let's listen to the explanation here from one of the three women who worked in Dr. Douglas Carpin's office about some of the things that went on, how the babies were killed. Cut 28.
Most of the time, we would see him where the fetus would come completely out, and of course the fetus would still be alive because it was still moving, and you could see, of course, you could see the stomach breathing, and that's when he would do his, he would snip the spine, as they're saying, that this doctor did, and of course the soft spot was one of the spots that he would take one of the forceps, or the, what is it called, the dilators, and stick it down the soft spot of the fetus's head.
You saw this happen?
Oh, yes.
All right. I mean, I don't know how she couldn't understand that this was illegal, and what doesn't she understand, that it's not a fetus once it's born alive? I mean, she's not the New York Times. She works in this profession. Does she not understand it's a baby?
Well, this is what we're seeing are former abortion clinic workers that really, in some ways, they're victims. In some ways, obviously, they're engaged in the abortions, but they're just so completely desensitized to what's going on. They've spent so many years or however long in these practices, and just like, it's kind of the same thing you saw with Kermit Gosnell, this absolutely crazy, out of touch with reality attitude, where he didn't realize or didn't admit that he did anything wrong. I mean, he, even after the fact, was saying, gee, I just don't know why I'm being prosecuted here. Why am I being held accountable for murder? I was providing a service to women. It's absolutely detached from reality. And it's something that I want to point out, too, that is said in this video, that's happening very frequently. This isn't a rare case of, once or twice or maybe even a handful of times where you've got a late-term abortion going on and babies who are being jabbed in the neck with these scissors or killed after they were born alive after abortions. In this video, one of the former abortion clinic workers says, and I quote, "I think we saw this every morning on several occasions. If we had 20-something patients, 10, 12, maybe 15 of the patients would be large procedures, and out of those, I was pretty sure that I was seeing at least 3 or 4 fetuses."
Yeah, as a matter of fact, not to interrupt, Steve, we have that next.
Way.
Why don't we hit cut 29? We actually have that cut next.
I think every morning I saw on several occasions. If we had 20-something patients, of course, maybe 10 or 12 or 13 or 15 patients would be large procedures, and out of those large procedures, I'm pretty sure I was seeing at least 3 to 4 fetus that were completely delivered in some way or another.
Unbelievable. And
this is every day, Steve. Every day this is happening. Here's the clinic worker, the person there on site. It's not a pro-life group. It's not somebody making an allegation. This is a former staff worker at Douglas Carpin's abortion clinic in Houston, Texas, saying on a daily basis we would have at least 3 or 4 babies who were completely delivered. They were born alive and then killed after that fact.
Well, and here's in cut 30, we're going to hear how the doctor would kill the baby with his own bare hands. Here's cut 30.
You see the baby alive.
Yes, sir.
And him kill that baby outside the womb.
Yes, sir.
And this would be done by jamming some sort of instrument into the
Either that
soft spot.
or actually twisting the head off the neck, kind of with his own bare hands.
And you saw that happen?
Yes, sir.
So he would twist the head off. I'm sorry.
Sometimes he would go through the stomach as well.
Sometimes he would do what?
He would like force it through the stomach.
The instrument, is it
And
beards?
like twist it.
Yeah.
So through the head, through the stomach, cutting the spine, and twisting the neck off the head, which if you could hear these women, if you can't see them, I could tell you they look as sincere, and two of them look very frightened almost as could be. The other one doesn't look as frightened, the one who's doing most of the speaking. But as you said, and you know better than me, they're not pro-life people. They're people who worked, you say, in his office, right?
Exactly. They are former abortion clinic workers. Many of them, after the fact now, once they've gotten out of the abortion industry, and this is something that your listeners definitely should do, is be praying for these abortion clinic workers. They're seeing basically the most brutal thing that happens on a daily basis on our planet, and they're getting out of this. There are many groups, pro-life groups and others, that are helping them get out of the abortion industry. Once they've done that, many of them are becoming Christian or pro-life or what have you, and a lot of them are beginning to speak out about what's going on, and we need more of them to come forward to expose what you and I talked about earlier, which is other Kermit Gosnells, other Douglas Carpens that are out there. We need them to be exposed, and those abortion practitioners have got to be held accountable under the law. So listeners, so definitely, if they know anybody who works there, encourage them to get out. There are support groups. There are others that are willing to help them find jobs and support, and just encourage them to get out of the abortion industry and help us hold these people accountable.
Let's listen to some more. This is the three of the women talking about a baby that was delivered alive that actually grabbed the doctor's hand. This is cut 31.
You remember that the one that he did, that the baby, the fetus came out and it was alive. He had thought he had actually killed it already, and he opened up his eyes and grabbed his hand, his finger. Remember that one?
No. What happened?
Supposedly they said that it was a botch. And it was a botched abortion. The fetus was still alive. He thought it was dead, and the fetus opened his eyes and actually
Grabbed his finger.
Was able to grab his finger. And the whole procedure, I guess, while he's doing the procedure,
He was getting
because after the fetus, of course, he has to massage the abdomen to bring the placenta down, or grab it with the forceps to bring it out.
And this baby was killed
alive.
how? Huh?
He was alive.
Well, yeah, if he's looking at him grabbing his finger.
Yeah.
Yeah. He thought he had finished with the baby.
He thought it was deceased
It
already.
was a disease already. He was getting ready to put it in the bag.
Did he talk about that?
One of his employees did. That's how I found out.
It's incredible, but before we comment, I want to hear one more talking about, she said, putting it in a bag. Let's skip one over to cut 33, and this explains how someone had a baby on the floor, and he just picked it up and put it in a trash bag. Cut 33.
I've seen a lot of cases where women would have to, they felt like they had to push and they had to run to the bathroom and stuff. And on some occasions, we had women that were, the fetus were falling into the toilet, or they were, or before even getting to the clinic, we had one incident where it was big news, where the fetus was left in the toilet. I don't know if y'all heard of that one. She was at McDonald's. They stopped there in the morning, and the fetus was left in the toilet, and nobody ever found out whose fetus it was, but it was one of his patients. We knew it because we were watching it on the news that day that she was supposed to be in the clinic.
Do you remember that one that she was on her way to the OR, Krystal? She was walking to her OR and she had it right there in the hallway.
She had her baby in the hallway?
Yes.
And what happened to that baby?
I wasn't down there when that happened. Were you down there?
He just picked it up with like a pad, one of those
Chucks.
a chuck, and just put it in a trash bag.
So the baby was born in a hallway on the way, I guess, to the abortion, and he picked it up and put it in a trash bag. It almost seems inconceivable what we're hearing. Almost seems made up, but you look at these women. What purpose do they have to make this up?
Well, Steve, I tell you, we talked about when Roe versus Wade came down in 1973, this slippery slope of what would abortion lead to, and it's led to infanticide, and it's happening on a daily basis in our country. Something's got to be done about it. Listeners really need to take time to contact state and local officials, no matter where they're listening to. Ask those officials to look into abortion clinics in your state. We know these practices are happening in definitely 2 states, certainly more that are on the way, and others that we probably don't even know about. People have got to begin looking into this. Like I said, Harris County authorities, State Department of Health people in Texas are looking into it now. But legislators need to be asked, hey, let's talk about this. We need hearings on a state and a federal level looking into, frankly, just infanticide that is happening in America. Live Action has many other films that they've come out with in the most recent weeks with other abortion practitioners that are willing to look the other way, that are willing to say, hey, an abortion didn't go right, or I purposely birthed a baby. I'm willing to let that baby die, or in some cases, purposely kill that baby after birth. This is happening on a daily basis, and we've got to do something about it.
All right, if you could stay for a couple more, just 2 more I want to skip to. Could we go to 36? And here there was a fee. He wanted to put them to sleep, the women to sleep, so that he could more easily get his allegedly get his deed done, according to the women. And here's cut 36.
It meant dishing out another $200. So if you is it going to hurt? I mean, this man would walk out the room and say, Deborah, go talk to her, tell her she needs to get put to sleep. And normally it was our job to go convince the girl that she had to get put to sleep. And a lot of them would raise a lot of hell. Right. But they didn't have no choice. They had to do what he said, because guess what? You're going to lose $150. In other words, that was $150 that you did not get back. So a lot of them would either lose the $150 or pay the $200 and go ahead and get it over with.
And finally, one more, and this is Deborah Edge again saying that some women would ask if the baby feels anything. Here's cut 37. A
lot of the questions have been, does the baby feel? And I think that would make me so mad, because I would say, why would that matter to you if you're coming in here to kill your baby? Why ask that question? And of course she would want to say, yeah, it feels, but that wasn't your job to say that. Your job was to, whatever it took to get that person in the back,
Now, Steve, what do you know about her in particular? I think that's Deborah Edge, if I'm not mistaken, one of the 3, the main one in the middle of the video. She seems, on one hand, she's saying, she kept calling them fetuses, but here she finally, called them baby and said, you're asking if it hurts. Well, why do you care? You're coming in to kill your baby. So it almost seems like she's had some kind of, is she one of the people that you've talked about that has, found religion, or is that's why she's speaking out, or what's her situation? Because I'm I see 2 different people here at times.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. My understanding is, and I don't know any of the 3 women in the video personally, but my understanding from other people that do is that all 3 of these women are now pro-life. They have found religion, like you said, and it's one of the things that really people need to stop and think about. We've talked for years about women who have abortions face increased risks of all sorts of mental health conditions, whether it's depression or thoughts of suicide, drug and alcohol addiction, what have you. Now take that from one woman who had an abortion to women who are assisting in doing abortions. Multiply that by 100 or 1,000 times, that mental health, depression, and suicide rates and other issues that they face. Certainly these women have got to be facing crazy things that you and I could only dream of in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder, things that they, other issues they may be facing in their lives. Again, listeners should definitely pray for these women. They've got a lot they've got to deal with over the years.
And Steve, folks could go to lifenews.com and check you out. Stephen Ertelt, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve. Have a good one.
You too.